How do you ruin an elite roster in one single afternoon? You ignore modern play calling innovation and hire a coach obsessed with outdated conservative principles. We are witnessing a schematic nightmare that will trap our explosive playmakers in a 1990s system. The disaster in Chicago has officially begun, and the fallout is going to be catastrophic. When a front office misreads its own competitive timeline this badly, it doesn't just lose games, it fractures an entire organizational identity. What we are about to watch unfold isn't just a tough adjustment period or a few growing pains along the way. It is a slow-motion, self-inflicted train wreck engineered by decision makers who somehow looked at a turbocharged modern racing engine and decided it desperately needed a horse-drawn carriage driver to steer it. To truly understand the scale of this impending disaster, you have to look at the sheer quality of what Chicago built on the offensive side of the ball before this hiring took place. This is not a rebuilding unit begging for structure, discipline, and a slow, methodical overhaul. This is a roster stacked with elite dynamic weapons. We are talking about genuine top-end speed on the outside, wide receivers who can destroy press coverage and create 3 yards of separation on vertical routes within 2 seconds of the snap. We are looking at a backfield populated by versatile playmakers designed for outside zone concepts, operating in open space, and catching the ball out of the backfield to punish over-aggressive linebackers. This receiving core demands modern route trees, high-low reads, deep crosses, and pre-snap motion setups that force secondary defenders to communicate on the fly under extreme pressure. On paper, this group is a dynamic scoring engine built to put up 30 points a game in their sleep, operating at a breakneck pace that forces opposing defenses to play on their heels from the opening kickoff. So, what does the front office do with this absolute goldmine of explosive potential? They go out into the market and hire a head coach whose entire operational philosophy is built on low possession, defensive grinding. They handed the keys to a traditional defensive-minded tactician who fundamentally views an offense not as a weapon to destroy an opponent, but as a utility tool designed to protect his own defense and burn time off the clock. His historical body of work is a masterclass in risk aversion. Play for field position, run the ball on first and second down to set up manageable third downs, punt early, and rely on defensive stops to win games 17-14. This creates an immediate, irreconcilable collision of philosophies. A ball control, keep the clock running mentality is the exact opposite of what this specific group of offensive playmakers needs to thrive. When you force explosive athletes into a rigid, grind-it-out framework, you do not simply limit their individual statistical output. You actively strip away their greatest competitive leverage, which is speed, pace, and mathematical stress placed on the defense. A conservative strategist inheriting a high-octane scoring machine isn't a complementary balance of styles. It is a schematic bloodbath waiting to happen. The moment this staff demands that an elite offense play scared, tighten up its formations, and abandon the vertical passing game in favor of low-risk, low-reward ball control, the structural tension in that building becomes terminal. The blueprint is flawed, the philosophy is broken, and the disaster is already underway. Let us get straight into the central, most devastating consequence of this hire, the systematic destruction of our franchise quarterback. Generational passing talents are not refined by playing scared, nor do they reach elite status by hiding inside a shell. They thrive in environments that leverage high-motion setups, complex pre-snap reads, vertical route trees, and the ultimate weapon in modern football, the freedom to improvise when a defensive coverage collapses. That unteachable ability to extend plays, manipulate deep safety coverage with his eyes, and throw with velocity into tight windows downfield is precisely why this franchise invested everything to get him. But under this new coaching regime's notoriously rigid play-calling structure, those natural instincts-driven strengths are not elevated, they are actively neutralized. Instead of stretching the field and stressing defensive boundaries, this outdated offensive system inevitably defaults to ultra-conservative checkdowns, uninspired screen passes on third and long, and telegraphed run splits on early downs that put the offense behind the chains before the drive even begins. It is the literal equivalent of handing a high-performance Ferrari to a driver who refuses to release the parking brake because he is terrified of speeding. By prioritizing ball security over calculated aggression, the coaching staff will slowly strip away the bold, downfield mentality that makes this quarterback special. They are attempting to force a generational arm talent into the role of a glorified game manager whose primary directive is simply not to lose the game, rather than actively going out to win it. The psychological toll of this dynamic cannot be overstated, especially when you look at the timetable. NFL history has proven time and again that the first 18 months of a young quarterback's development under a new staff dictate his long-term confidence and processing speed for the rest of his career. This early window is where internal pocket clocks are calibrated, trust with playmakers is forged, and aggressive decision-making is either rewarded or broken. If you train a gifted passer to play with hesitation, to constantly second-guess what his eyes are telling him downfield, and to default to safe checkdowns out of fear of sideline retaliation, you permanently ruin his internal clock. He will start seeing ghosts in the pocket, dropping his eyes to the pass rush instead of keeping them downfield, and holding onto the ball a beat too long because the rigid, static route designs fail to create natural separation against modern defensive looks. Chicago is not just risking a sluggish start or a throwaway season. They are threatening to stunt the growth of a star quarterback during the most vulnerable, crucial phase of his professional life. You cannot rewire a star's confidence once it has been broken by months of suffocating, risk-averse play calling. By refusing to adapt the scheme to the signal caller, this staff is laying the foundation for a ruined career before it even has the chance to truly begin. To understand why this hiring is an unmitigated disaster, you have to look at the cold, hard realities of how the modern NFL operates in 2026. Football has evolved into an era defined by spatial manipulation, pre-snap communication stress, and hyper-aggressive, data-driven decision-making. The league's premier Super Bowl contenders do not win by simply out-executing their opponents in static formations. They win by using high rates of pre-snap motion to force defenses to give away their coverage shells early. They condense formations to create free releases, flood zone voids with overlap concepts, and treat fourth and short situations inside opponent territory not as risky gambles, but as mandatory conversion opportunities. The modern game rewards offensive coordinators who view play calling as a fluid, aggressive chess match designed to dictate terms to the defense. Now, contrast that modern reality with the preferred methodology of Chicago's new hire. His historical profile reads like an archaeological relic from the 1990s, a heavy reliance on static, ground and pound run splits, predictable personnel packages, and a stubborn refusal to integrate modern pre-snap motion into his weekly game plans. When you break down recent film of his previous stops, the systemic vulnerability becomes painfully obvious. Opposing defensive coordinators, particularly the league's sharpest young play callers, have systematically dismantled this exact defensive and offensive framework. They do not have to guess what is coming, because the formations never lie. Without motion to uncover coverage or force linebackers to shift their run fits pre-snap, modern defenses can sit in disguised coverages, squat on short to intermediate routes, and dial up exotic blitz packages with zero fear of being hurt over the top. The statistical reality makes this trajectory even more damning. In today's league, it is a mathematical impossibility to maintain a top 10 scoring offense while consistently ranking near the bottom of the league in pre-snap motion, aggressive fourth down attempts, and early down passing percentage. Passing on first down is the ultimate cheat code for staying ahead of the chains. Opting instead for predictable, run-heavy first down splits guarantees that your offense will routinely face third and long situations. Once an offense is trapped in third and long against modern pass rushes, no amount of grit, discipline, or culture can save the drive. By willingly adopting a playbook stripped of high-motion setups and aggressive math-backed decision-making, the coaching staff is handing the opposition a massive tactical advantage before the ball is even snapped. They are bringing a knife to a laser-guided missile fight. When your entire offensive philosophy relies on executing 10 to 12 play drives without a single penalty, dropped pass, or missed assignment, your margin for error shrinks to absolute zero. Modern defenses are far too fast, far too disguised, and far too well coached to let a static, predictable offense sustain those long drives over 60 minutes. It is an outdated relic masquerading as football strategy, and in 2026, it will get exposed every single Sunday. Schemes fail on paper first, but the destruction becomes real when it spills into the locker room. Football players are not mindless pieces on a whiteboard. They are elite, hyper-competitive professionals who understand the modern game just as well as the analysts in the booth. They know what high-powered, high-motion offenses look like because they watch film every week. When you take a room packed with prime offensive talent, wide receivers who spend their whole lives dominating single coverage, dynamic backs who thrive in open space, and tight ends built to seam stretch defenses, and ask them to run a watered-down 1990s field position offense, resentment builds at a terrifying speed. They recognize almost instantly when their statistical output, their individual market value, and their competitive leverage are being sacrificed on the altar of conservative coaching dogma. This frustration is not quiet, and it does not stay hidden behind closed doors for long. It begins with small signs on the sideline. A wide receiver throwing his hands up after running another empty clear-out route while the quarterback checks down short of the line to gain. An explosive running back coming off the field after 3 consecutive internal dive plays. A offense slumping back to the bench after yet another uninspired 3 and out. As the weeks drag on and the offense repeatedly stalls, the structural damage spreads across the entire roster like a contagion. The defense, which was promised a balanced team built on control and discipline, finds itself stuck on the field for nearly 40 minutes a game. They step onto the field gassed by the middle of the third quarter because their own offense cannot sustain a single 6-play drive, forcing them to absorb endless defensive snaps against opponent offenses that actually utilize modern pacing and space. The resulting locker room fracture is completely inevitable. You will watch a classic organizational breakdown split down the middle, a defensive unit furious at being left exposed by an incompetent, stagnant offense, and an offensive group deeply resentful of a coaching staff that refuses to unchain its playmakers. It is only a matter of time before that internal friction breaches the surface in front of the media microphones. Pay close attention to the specific veteran leaders, the star receivers accustomed to double-digit targets or the offensive line, leaders tired of blocking telegraphed run calls on 2nd and 10, when their public press conference answers shift from generic team cliches about execution to pointed passive-aggressive comments about getting the ball to our playmakers or needing to be more aggressive, the fuse is already lit. Once a locker room loses faith in the tactical competence of its head coach, the culture collapses, and no amount of forced speeches or discipline can ever put it back together. So why did the front office make this decision in the first place? Because when organizations operate out of fear, they default to culture and discipline over tactical innovation. They hired a strict manager to control the room, rather than a modern strategist capable of outthinking the elite play callers sitting on the opposing sideline. The leadership convinced themselves that a firm hand, a low-risk game plan, and a defensive identity were the missing ingredients to transform a talented roster into a consistent contender. But in today's high-powered league, prioritizing old-school culture over schematic leverage isn't a safe strategy, it is a competitive death sentence. The financial and competitive window for this team is slamming shut far faster than the front office cares to admit. A franchise quarterback on a rookie contract paired with elite offensive playmakers in their prime represents the single most valuable window in professional sports. You build a monster roster precisely to take advantage of that exact timeline. By pairing this specific personnel group with an outdated, risk-averse system, the front office is burning precious years on a doomed tactical experiment. Every Sunday spent trying to force a high-flying offense to play plodding, ball control football is another step toward wasting a generational opportunity. The sober reality is that you cannot fit a square peg into a round hole and expect a championship trophy at the end of the day. Modern football demands alignment, a seamless execution bridge where the front office's roster construction, the head coach's philosophy, and the play caller's scheme all pull in the exact same direction. Chicago has engineered the absolute opposite, a severe structural divide where the personnel on the field actively conflicts with the playbook on the sideline. Unless this coaching staff undergoes an unprecedented, immediate transformation in how they approach play calling and player development, this won't be remembered as a simple learning curve. It will end the only way mismatched hires ever do: in public frustration, a fractured locker room, and a total organizational reset within 2 seasons.